this video is not too practical because I don't discuss a scenario and then tell you what to do. Rather, this video is a bit more abstract, and I'm going to share a model that I thought about in the last few weeks that hopefully will inspire a good decision in you, that will hopefully make it easier for you to find your direction in life. So, as you might know, my name is Krill, and my goal is to inspire 10,000 good decisions. As such, I really like to talk about self-improvement, strategy, philosophy, fulfillment, and stuff like that. And so, the problem with most other model in the sense what mental image the counselor will give you, that's what model essentially means, is that they are based on two things. They are based on interest and your personality. So interest means, for instance, science, law, medicine, business. That's what interest roughly refers to. And personality means, are you introverted, extroverted, creative, not creative, submissive, dominant? And these models have a problem, you see. When you already know your interests and your personality, you obviously don't need these models. But people who need these models, who need direction, don't know their personality and don't know their interests. Because if they knew their personality and interests, they wouldn't need to think about their decision. It would be obvious. And so the problem with trying to find your personality, your direction based on your personality and your interests, is that you can't know your personality. So someone may ask you, are you creative or not? Well, how should you know that? A person surrounded by extroverts is going to judge himself less extroverted if they're a bit introverted. An introvert surrounded by extroverts is going to judge himself to be more extroverted, even though they may be on the exact same level, or the first person surrounded by extroverts may actually be a lot higher. In that sense, it's impossible to make objective statements about your personality. Hence, it just doesn't work. That's why. Because we can't read other people's minds. Therefore, we have nothing really to compare our judgments to. Therefore, our judgments are useless. And basing your decisions on interests also doesn't quite work, because what if you don't have interests? What if your interests change? And also, who said that pursuing your interests will make you happy? I like photography. I've tried working as a photographer. It was horrible. So, given that both personality and your interests don't offer any real answers, it explains very much why your typical counselor can't actually give you direction, can only give you mediocre advice. And so I thought of a model which eliminates both the need for personality and eliminates the need for character. For interest, I meant to say personality and interests, not personality and character. That would be the same thing. And so that's where my model comes in. And now, let me explain it to you. So you have 3 questions. Question number 1, do you want power or freedom? Question number 2, do you want money or status? Question number 3, do you want family or pleasure? You can also ask these questions in a different way. Do you want to eliminate in the sense of, do you want the population average of power or freedom, status or money, family or hedonism? So my model works this way. You have these 3 questions which are all dichotomies, meaning you can't both pursue money and status. I will discuss later why. And so you have to pick one. And if you can't pick one, you typically eliminate one and you use the one that's left. You have these 3 questions, but you probably also have a favorite. So my favorite is status, but I also want freedom over power, and between family and pleasure, I'm kind of 50-50, because family is not quite relevant since I'm kind of only 18 years old. And so let me now explain how these questions came to be and why they're valid. So let's discuss power versus freedom. The main difference between power and freedom is attachment. If you are free, you are not attached. But if you're the CEO of a company, you're everyone's bitch. You're the bitch of the customers, of the suppliers, of the employers, of the law, of the investors, everything. So you may think that a CEO is free because he can decide what he eliminates or not. That's not quite true. If you study history and even authoritarian systems where power is basically everything, you'll quickly realize that even the most powerful person is not as free as you thought he was, because no one rules alone. And you are, even if you have power, you are way, way more dependent on others than you think. So that's why power and freedom are mutually exclusive. You either try to affect others while being surrounded by everyone else, or you try to be outside of the system and try to be free, non-attached and non-affected. That's why mutually exclusive, even though it may seem like being a CEO gives you freedom, it really doesn't. And so what do you do about that? Why did this become the first question? Well, because this has by far the biggest impact, I would say. The difference between money and status isn't as large as between power and freedom. Because if you play the game between power and freedom, your personality most likely is a completely different one. If you're interested in freedom, let's say, you probably aren't interested in being a CEO, but you are rather interested in nature. And those are most likely mutually exclusive. Although some people just combine everything that seems mutually exclusive. So you may as well do whatever you want. But as a rule of thumb, power and freedom are mutually exclusive, because one requires attachment, the other requires non-attachment. So let's move on to the next one. Status versus money. You may now say, well, a celebrity can have both. That's not quite true. You see, a celebrity isn't a job. It's just someone who's very good at what they're doing. So let's say you mean by celebrity your typical actor. The actor's combination is quite clear. It's freedom, status, and pleasure. So being a celebrity means that you are just insanely good. And if you are insanely good, then all those good things like power, freedom, status, money, family, pleasure, all start to kind of converge. But you can't pursue them all at the same time because of your limited resources, especially at the beginning. In that sense, celebrities don't disprove anything. They rather prove my point that you must pick your things and then go with them. And whether you become successful or not is essentially not your choice. That's determined by many, many factors like society, culture, your skills, everything else, you know? So don't think that celebrities are exceptions to this game, because They are just successful. That's why they're exceptional, not because they pursued contradictory things at the same time. And so why is status and money mutually exclusive most of the time? Well, jobs that give status are cool. That's why many people want to do them. Jobs that don't give status have to compensate for that by giving money. In other words, boring jobs pay more to attract workers. So let me give you an example. I study medical engineering, and the kids in school, when I present it to them, think that this is a cool degree. When you were to tell some kids that you study train administration or something like that, which may pay the exact same, no one's going to think that this is cool. But this is why it pays more, relatively more, for what you do. Because just no one cares about it, and that's why it has to pay more to compensate for that. Let me give you another example to illustrate why it's mutually exclusive. So let's imagine two doctors. One doctor is a plastic surgeon in Dubai, makes $1 million a year. The other one is a heart surgeon and makes 40k because he works for Doctors Without Borders. Now, if you were to tell people that you work at Doctors Without Borders, you'll have a lot more status than if you do plastic surgery in Dubai, even though you may make $1 million rather than 40k. So you may make 30 times more, but still have a bit less status. So that's why status and money is kind of a spectrum. The jobs that pay well are typically very boring. The jobs that don't pay so well are typically cool and everyone wants to do them. Although there's, of course, nuance there. Some cool jobs are insanely difficult. Like doctor is insanely difficult, although it's a cool job. Generally speaking, a cool job. And investment banking pays well, but is extremely boring and is also extremely difficult. So there is nuance everywhere, so you shouldn't think too deeply about the edge cases. But generally speaking, money and status are exclusive. You have to pick one most of the time. Either you're an actor or you do business train administration or something like that. You probably get my point. Although, once again, there are exceptions to everything. Even the most logically consistent philosophy will eventually contradict itself. So take it lightly, but remember what I told you. And now the final criterion, or rather lever, or rather question, is family versus pleasure. So there's not really much to say here because it's not very relevant for me because I'm just 18. But you can either build or explore. You can either be a digital nomad and travel around, or you can settle down and start a family. So it's quite self-explanatory. Yes, a family can provide pleasure, but once again, if you have a family, you are less likely to travel around, you are less likely to party, so you are less likely to be hedonistic. In that sense, this is, in my opinion, the most straightforward criterion. But as I've already implied, interests can change over time. So if you are right now interested in pleasure when you're 14, that's okay. If you're interested in pleasure while you're 50, that's a problem. And so this is just to keep in mind. Do you want action or do you want stability? This is largely independent from all other jobs because there are high-paying jobs that are stable, like doctor, but there are high-paying jobs that are unstable, like, for instance, entrepreneur. So all of these criterion are independent from one another. That's why they're all perpendicular. And So what do you do if you don't know whether you want, for instance, status or money? Well, you ask yourself which one you would rather eliminate. Would you rather have the population average of money or status? If I phrase it this way, my personal answer becomes absolutely clear. I would rather make 50k but be a legend rather than be a billionaire and be an incel at the same time. So, in that sense, ask yourself which one you would rather eliminate. And if you are unsure whether the profession you have in mind even fits on this spectrum, just ask yourself which of the 6 criterion you would rather eliminate. So I would first eliminate power, because I hate management. I hate having to tell people what they should do. I would then eliminate money, because I can probably be perfectly content making 50k a year. I would then eliminate pleasure. And finally, I would rather eliminate status than freedom. Although I can't really decide between status and freedom. This is generally how I would do it if my job didn't fit any particular description. And so, if you have found your 3 criteria, or 2, if you are split between, if you don't find one of these criteria relevant, if you find your 1, 2, or 3 criterion, then go to ChatGPT and just ask which jobs there are, or go to your career counselors and ask them to work from this foundation, and then you shall figure it out. I want you to try as many things as possible, because the thing is, even if you have made up your mind, people are very bad at predicting what will make them happy. So basically, the only option you have is to try out as many things as possible, and then everything shall work out, hopefully. I very hope that this video helped you. Before I finish it, I would like to repeat: power versus freedom, status versus money, hedonism versus family. Those are the 3 levers that you have. Pick. Either pick one in each category, or pick your favorite, and then pursue that. Then find direction. Find careers that offer you from that foundation. And I hope that this will help you. If it did, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.